Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to talk to you this afternoon about the latest report by IPCC about the 1.5 degrees C warming. I know there'll be other speakers after me, so I will concentrate on a few aspects of the report and not cover the whole matter. I will concentrate on the climate science aspects, say a few words about the other aspects as well. First of all, the context. Why this report was made. Actually, it's coming from the Article 2 of the Framework Convention, if you think about it, which was talking about the need to avoid dangerous interference. Then in 1996, the European Environment Council for the first time interpreted this notion of dangerous interference in terms of a global temperature not to pass. And they said for us, it means dangerous should be lower than a 2-degree warming. Then many years later, in 2009, the Copenhagen conference, COP15, translated this into a world objective, which was confirmed in Cancun the following year in a formal way. And then it was still amended in Paris in 2015 in the Paris Agreement, and the objective became not to stay under 2 degrees, but to stay well below 2 degrees, which is not the same, which a few people have forgotten, but also pursuing the efforts to limit warming to 1.5 degrees C. The COP21 in Paris also decided to invite the IPCC to provide a special report to be ready this year on the impacts of global warming of 1.5 degrees C above pre-industrial levels and related global greenhouse gas emission pathways. There's also a very interesting Article 17 in the COP decision taken in Paris together with the Paris Agreement, noting that the aggregated level on the basis of the total number of INDCs for 2025 and 2030 gave numbers which were much higher than what would be needed to be on a least cost 2 degrees C trajectory, and also noted that for the 1.5 degrees C, the level to shoot for in 2025-2030 would have to be identified in the IPCC special report we're talking about this afternoon. This is illustrated by this diagram coming from the UNFCCC Secretariat, showing and published in 2016, showing the gap between the business as usual scenario or the pre-INDC scenarios, if you prefer, the aggregated effect that INDCs would have if they were implemented. That's what is shown in yellow here. And the two trajectories, the blue one for the least cost 2 degrees C trajectory and the green one for the least cost 1.5 degrees C trajectory. After a scoping process organized by the IPCC, the IPCC plenary in Bangkok in October 2016 decided to accept the COP21 invitation and to produce a report with a very long title, which is an IPCC special report on the impacts of global warming of 1.5 degrees C above pre-industrial levels and related global greenhouse gas emission pathways. But the IPCC added this in the context of strengthening the global response to the threat of climate change, sustainable development, and efforts to eradicate poverty. So this is important. We should remember that the same year the Paris Agreement was adopted, the UN adopted a few weeks before the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, of which climate action is goal number 13, but goal number 1 is eradicating poverty. So this is the outline that the IPCC plenary agreed with in October 2016, just 2 years ago. You see the different parts of the report, and this is what the authors have delivered after working very hard for 2 years to produce this report, taking on board, basing their work on about 6,000 articles in the mostly in the peer-reviewed literature, taking on board more than 40,000 comments by expert reviewers and by governments. And the result is a landmark report. Just for the fun, in a sense, I'm reproducing here without any change except for the title, the conclusions I presented in January 2017 at a seminar that was organized in the same building you are in by the same organization, and you can judge whether these conclusions were warranted or not. I say then 1.5C matters. There'll be lower impacts. Adaptation will be less costly than in 2-degree world. Even if there's a temporary overshoot above 1.5, it would be very ambitious to reduce emissions enough for 1.5 long-term average temperature above pre-industrial. It would be a little easier with overshoot. The slower radical changes in emission patterns take place, the more one may need uncertain or risky technologies, such as large use of carbon dioxide removal from the atmosphere, and possibly at the expense of a conflict with food production. And I say that the IPCC report would be essential, but that much could be done without waiting for it. So this is the report, the cover of the report as finalized last week in Korea at the IPCC plenary, or at least presented to the world last week and finalized 2 days before. And I'll concentrate on the first elements of the report. Where are we now, says the IPCC? Well, the warming has reached 1.0 degrees C already. There are consequences for people, nature, and livelihoods already. At the current rate of warming, the 1.5 degree limit would be crossed somewhere between 2030 and 2052. But the good news is that if you take only the emissions up until today, it's not enough to commit the world to be above 1.5 degrees C. So in a word, the future is still in our hands. So this is an illustration that's not in the IPCC report, but which shows the speed at which we are indeed getting close since 1850, the beginning of global measurements of that red line there, the 1.5 degrees C limit, and the white line is the 2 degrees C limit. You see that we are approaching fast from those two limits. We have seen since the middle of the 20th century several extreme events increasing either in frequency or intensity. The number of extreme hot days and heavy precipitation events have become more common, for example. The impacts are then compared in the report, and the IPCC has made a special effort to compare the differences in impact for a 1.5 degree world and a 2 degree world. There will be less extreme weather where people live. For a 1.5 degree C world, the sea level rise would be a little smaller, 10 centimeters less. There would be 10 million fewer people exposed to risk of rising seas. There will be a lower impact on biodiversity and species. I think you will hear more about that from another speaker. There would be smaller reductions in yield of maize, rice, and wheat, which are very important for food security. The global population exposed to water shortages would be up to 50% less in a 1.5 degree C world compared to a 2 degree world. So there are many good reasons to stay under 1.5 degrees C, as you can see here. This is also illustrated in the IPCC report by a few diagrams, including this one, an update to the famous reasons for concern diagram. I will zoom on the top part, showing the increase in risk level in 5 important categories, and the first one being risks to unique and threatened systems. And you can see that when you go from 1 to 1.5, you enter already the high risk zone, and when you go from 1.5 to 2, you go to very high risk for that category of reason for concern. The World Resource Institute has produced a very nice presentation of some of the numbers present in the IPCC report. I will not go through it. My slides will be available on my webpage afterwards. But these are some of the numbers highlighting the significant changes in terms of impact avoided if one is what would be able to stay below 1.5 degrees C warming. Just an illustration of the kind of detail assessment that's available in the report. We're not going to read this, but it shows you for some agricultural key values that the yields of maize, rice, and wheat would be significantly less affected in a 1.5 degree world than in a 2 degree world. I will not speak about the two following parts of the report, which will be discussed by other speakers this afternoon. So the emission pathways and system transitions consistent with 1.5 degrees C global warming. That's the title of the section after the impacts I just evoked briefly. And the last section is on strengthening the global response in the context of sustainable development and effort to eradicate poverty. I will just show you two or three illustrations, one about the global emission pathways, showing that the global net CO2 emissions would need to reach the net zero value, so as much CO2 absorbed by human activities than emissions due to human activities, and this would need to take place around 2050 or even slightly before, possibly, at least if one wants to stay under 1.5 degrees C without an overshoot above this value. So it's a very challenging objective, but the IPCC then in its last section explains at length how by exploiting the synergies between other sustainable development goals, it would be possible to have shorter term benefits together with climate benefits in the longer term, and that it would be possible to protect climate and achieve some of the SDGs, which are so important as well. So the hidden message of this report is, yes, we can, but what is more hidden even is what is now needed at the world scale is much more political will. I thank you very much for your attention, and I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the second web page there, the second link there, will contain this afternoon already my slides, the slide I just presented to you. Thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you an excellent seminar.